How was your weekend?
It was so good.
Anybody do anything cool? Nothing? It was so nice out. You went to the beach? Which beach?
It was 8 miles from Bethany. So like for you to join the
Okay, anybody else do anything? Go for a hike? Go outside?
Now,
I watched WrestleMania.
Oh, come on now. What happened to the childish spirit? Okay, so, at this point in time, I need all headphones out. You can put your computers and your phones away. We're not going to need it for the first activity. So everything off your desk. We're just going to be doing a quick matching activity. Today we're learning about the age of absolutism. We're on to our new unit, which is the age of revolutions and conflict. So the unit essential question is, how have revolutions and conflict influenced the development of the modern world, which we know is it has a big impact on who we are today, right? We have the American Revolution, that's part of this whole unit. And the question I want you guys to think about today is, who has the right to rule? What gives someone the right to rule? Okay, so what you're gonna be doing, I'm gonna give you guys these little vocabulary strips. In groups of 3, you guys are gonna organize them. There's 2 different types of things in here, sorry, they're very tiny. The ones that are bolded and in all caps, they're the group headers, the groupings. And then the ones in lowercase that are not bolded are the ones that you're gonna filter them into. So for example, you have one for absolutism. What are the vocab words that go with absolutism? You obviously might not know the answers to these. I just want you guys to get familiar with the vocabulary. I want you guys to look at it, see what you do remember, see what you don't remember. Sound good? Okay, I'm gonna put 5 minutes on the clock. You guys have to get into groups of 3. Somebody come join them over here. Somebody, groups of 3. Y'all can do that, right?
Yeah.
You're seniors, you got it. Who's doing left? Groups of 3, what are we doing, gentlemen?
You want the well-dressed man.
You're gonna be in group of 2?
I don't like the
You guys got this? Who's in your group of 3?
That's the rest right here.
I don't think it did.
Sorry.
It'll be too difficult.
Consistently dressing. He does it just because he has a cool set.
So say you can put your computer away, you're not going to need it for this first part.
Here, you only have 5 minutes. So pick up all the bullwords.
Trinity, you can put your phone away for this first session.
Fever model. Is that like, the things I know. Yes.
So absolutely has to go.
Scientific method, absolutely. Okay. So it's, well, I said all along. Okay, so are we actually?
I know it's getting
No, we are.
Enlightenment.
Systematic. No, I will philosophy.
Really? I thought I heard.
Enlightenment. Sure. What does that word even mean?
Alright, let's start. Let's start
Is crisis a political revolution? Maybe.
crisis. Honestly.
Maybe if I do it there.
Yeah. Separation of powers.
Crisis, disease, fever.
Smart timing.
Divine articles, divine right.
Over the units, yes. We'll get a few today.
I think it's
I don't know, these is right, these have to be right.
Okay,
Well, you would have to be in order? Because intellectual text is
all
like
ideas of emotion.
things that you read, it like has to be interpretation. So like this narration. You read that everything you need about, you know, English science perspective, you know, you write, you're making yourself a process, this is something else to do with level theory, and then
Besides that,
It's just okay?
that was a lot.
I don't know what this one says. Guillotine, but it's
It's a guillotine.
I was like,
You guys ready to
no.
Okay. So you're gonna be happy with that. I think you have a the guillotine is How are we doing again here? What you're thinking. Yeah, okay. What's it sound like?
What the?
And then a lot of the political stuff, we all kind of have to That's okay, we said it.
Thank you so much.
Now we have
How are we doing over here?
Oh, I think we got some data.
Something that comes out.
Mine is really low on these. No, they're not even. What were you trying to explain some of them to me?
Well,
How is that? I didn't even hear it.
I was just trying to get in the mind. I was
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, bring it back up here.
All right.
Here's what we're gonna do now. You guys are all pretty close together, so that works out really well. What you're gonna do, turn to the group that's the closest to you. So that'd be you two groups, you two groups, you two. You guys are gonna compare and contrast what you guys kind of thought about each of these pairings. What do you guys have the same? What do you guys have different? Can they give you an explanation for why they thought differently? I'm gonna put 5 more minutes on the clock, and you guys are gonna talk this out.
I mean, we put it in the same.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's
So for a fever model, we put crisis, incubation, and guillotine.
Intellectual, technological.
What'd you guys put for fever?
Fever model, we put crisis, incubation,
for political.
symptomatic.
Intellectual.
Yeah, that was the one that we did.
Oh, that was
Systematic, but,
We were
what?
I know it has to do with love.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, what
So
about
it could be intellectual devices.
Alright, we got a couple. We got
But it also has to do with.
articles of confederation, separation of powers.
You gotta project your voice.
Separation of powers.
Okay, I got one.
3 estates. Guillotine.
Okay, no.
When you're thinking, why did you choose 13 for the answers?
Fever model of revolution. Fever model
No, it's like
I'm destroyed by your
Actually, I put it there.
Symptomatic. Why did you do it? Scientific method.
No.
I just put it there.
No, but I understand why these things. It's like,
And convalescent.
like, if you didn't believe something, or like you did something, they would go
You practiced it, but over after.
like if you didn't like, I don't know, whatever.
I'm putting political revolution.
We had 2. Only 2? Yeah, we had absolute monarchs and then the divine right.
Let me put the
I
other.
think the
What's divine?
We put scientific method in.
People write this because.
What about
we
intellectual
feel as
method?
though
You got a couple
it kind of
actually.
goes
The scientific
all
method,
like political,
the
all that.
enlightenment, philosophy,
So we put it down here
heliocentric
because,
theory, and the
for
geocentric theory.
Versailles, Versailles.
You guys did that the best of
Okay.
them.
It was Versailles.
Do you guys remember the Treaty of Versailles?
Yes, we knew it could go for political revolutions, but they y'all put it under.
Which one were absolutely?
Right here.
Yeah, we did all of them except for,
Like,
we did the scientific method.
Why do you do this?
Well, because, I mean, it's a method, it's a scientific method, it's something like,
We
like,
put
I think of like chemistry, like, what did they write it for? Like a method that is, yeah, like.
So, not to give anything away, this is not referring to the Treaty of Versailles.
Like it's a method to do
So,
something.
that's what however, like we did before.
It's not like a theory, it's something that was like.
This is talking about, do you guys know why treaties are needed the way they're needed?
We're a team here.
Here they happen. It happened in Versailles.
Okay, so
Enough. Some would somewhere.
I don't remember this. I don't like
We already know. What are we feeling? Okay, which one's from the order? I don't know.
Literally on the end of political revolution.
Do you have a favorite, like,
This is our history right here, though. American history.
do you have a favorite unfolding American history?
Let's talk about this one. Democratic.
I'm a little curious.
Personally,
I have to.
I didn't mean to say that.
What did she
What's
say?
your favorite?
out loud.
You guys have that.
I just said it like that.
We're helping countries in Europe.
Why do you guys disagree? And anything else kind of related. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you guys can get back into your seats. Bring it up here. I think you guys had some really good rationales for why you chose a lot of the things you chose. And I think that you could definitely make arguments for certain things that you guys placed. Here's really what it looks like. But again, like I said, you can definitely make arguments for each side. Oh my goodness, come on now. So here's really how the breakdown would go. So a lot of you, this is one of the ones that I think had the biggest point of contention. A lot of you thought that Versailles was referring to the Treaty of Versailles, which I really appreciate you guys pulling from that background knowledge. However, it's referring to the place, Versailles. How do treaties get their names, Azaria? Based upon where they were located. Yeah, where they were written. So the Treaty of Versailles, which comes a little bit later after what we're talking about today, does get signed in Versailles, but that's not what we're talking about. Another one that I saw that you guys had a little bit of a problem with, and I'm not even going to be able to say it. Democratization. Someone say it for me.
Democratization.
That was another one that seemed like you guys were moving it around. And I think Ryan made a really good point. We tend to think of democracy as a positive thing, right? We give it like a good spin. Countries that are democratic are good. Countries that are not democratic are bad. Do you guys feel like you've gotten that kind of vibe throughout your schooling experience, right? We make people think of the Cold War. We kind of make people who aren't democratic seem evil, and we're in the right. So I think that he made a really good point. I forget where you put it. Where did you put it, Brian?
Put it in the Beaver model of revolution.
The Beaver model, because he said that's kind of like the end goal. It's a democratic size. I don't even know. Make them democratic, right? Bring them into the good. We're going to talk about all of these throughout the unit, and a few of them we're going to actually hit on today. If you guys could, just bunch them back up. If you can, paperclip them, paperclip them. But it doesn't matter if they get a little messed up. It's okay. While you're doing that, I will need you guys to pull out your form of note-taking, whether that be paper, your laptop, whatever you want to do. Does not matter to me. And I'll come around and collect those real quick. What? Just shove them together. It's not that serious, I promise. Okay.
No, because I try to do it like I just have to roll with your earbuds, so I have to do it.
Sir?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh wait, I still had your pen.
Your resolution.
Y'all done? At this point in time, everybody should have out some form of note-taking. Some form of note-taking should be on your desk by now. Do you guys have your... Okay, bring it back up to me. So we're going to talk about two things today. Two of those categories that you guys looked at. Absolutism and the fever model. The fever model, essentially, you're going to look at it later, you're going to do a little bit of a reading on it. The fever model is the model in which revolutions happen. They believe it follows a specific pattern, and then there's usually a revolution. It usually ends in a revolution, whether that be a successful one or not. The backstory to those is usually an absolutist government. So absolutism is something that you guys seem to not really have a handle on what it was. I heard some people talking about this idea of it being complete control, all that kind of stuff, and that's a really good use of that root word. These are just two quotes that I really liked. One by JFK. He's obviously not in this time period, but he says, those who make peaceful revolutions impossible make violent revolutions inevitable. And then this other one down there, it says, in a revolution, as in a novel, the most difficult part is the end. Okay, so the causes of absolutism. These are things that we already talked about, right? It's the Protestant Reformation, the growth of trade, and the decline of feudalism. So an absolutist government, we're going to look at the exact definition in just a second, but an absolutist government is a government in which there's a ruler who has complete control. They have control over every aspect. they're in control of the government, they're in control of your social life, they're in control of your religion. They have full and complete control. And some of these causes come from the Protestant Reformation. People start to split up, right? We know that people are starting to turn Catholic. We know that people are turning Protestant, and they're starting to split the religion a little bit. The growth of trade. People are becoming, actually back to the Reformation, sorry about that. We know that during the Reformation, the power from the church kind of gets taken away, right? Because people are splitting off into their own religions, and the church no longer is the center of life. And because of that, local leaders, people in charge, they start to gain a lot of power. Growth of trade fuels the economy, brings wealth in, makes those leaders stronger. The economy is good. We know that we tend not to question our leaders as much, right? And then the decline of feudalism. Feudalism gave a really strict social structure, so after feudalism declined, there needed to be a replacement for that, right? This is one of my favorite guys on this picture right here. That is Louis the 14th, sorry. We're gonna talk about him later. He's a pretty interesting guy. And the effects of absolutism. It limits individual rights. There's an abuse of power. And then the Enlightenment eventually occurs. And we're going to talk about the Enlightenment, so you don't need to write anything down about that just yet. But in an absolutist government, just like I told you, they have complete control. They make the laws, they have control over their nobles, they have control over their religion, they have control over the people, the army. How is this different from our government? Does the president have complete control?
No.
Can he wage war when he wants?
No.
No. Does the president get to decide what our laws are? No. So already you can see that it's a really different form of government from what we know today. And as Brian mentioned to us, this is kind of the kind of government that we would usually associate with being bad. At the time, not everybody thought it was bad. But think about it. If you have a bad absolutist leader, what's life going to be like for you? Terrible. If you have a good leader, what's life going to be like for you? Kind of thinking back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome, remember we talked about those leaders, those dictators. If you had a crazy one like Nero, how was your life?
Horrible.
Horrible. They just came out and killed you in the street. Didn't matter what you thought. If you had a good leader, then your life was prosperous, right? So this is Europe. This is kind of the breakdown. It's not how we would picture Europe today. We don't have official cities, states yet. We don't have official countries. They're usually empires. And then this is absolutism. This is the definition you're going to need. So an absolutist government, it's a system in which the ruler holds absolute power. This means over the government, over their lives. Like I said, they get to choose your religion. There's no written constitution or Bill of Rights. And they rule based off this idea of the divine right. Divine right meaning that their right to rule comes from God. How, if you have a government based off of the divine right, this belief that your authority comes from God, how would that make it difficult to rebel against? Why would it be difficult to rebel against a government that you believe is based on God? Talk to the person next to you, kind of think about that. Why would it be difficult?
Kill you.
Take 15 more seconds to talk to the person next to you about this. Why would it be difficult to rebel against this sort of movement?
over.
God is saying this, so we're not doing it.
Okay, bring it back up to me. Mark, you had a really good answer to this. Why don't you tell the class, why would it be difficult to rebel against a government that's based off of this sort of belief?
So, like, the people, like, they believe that, like, God is, like, this powerful man that could probably, like, you know, hurt them, you know, or send them to a bad place if they do any wrong, like, in his name. So, like, if you're to, like, keep telling these people, like, oh, like, we're doing all this bad stuff, but God, this is what God has said that, like, that we can do. So, like, you're not going to rebel against God, basically. Like, that's who they would be rebelling against. They wouldn't be rebelling against the government. It would be God who they're rebelling against, and that's, like, against their, like, holy religion.
That's good. Anybody want to add to that? What did you guys talk about? Laura, what did you guys talk about?
I guess if it's a government that uses some kind of, a lot of punishments come if you do anything against them.
So it's based on God, so a lot of punishments would come if you tried to rebel, right? And you guys are exactly right. You're not just rebelling against the government if you rebel against a leader who was given their position because of God, right? You're rebelling against God as well. Very good point. Now I want you guys to discuss this question as well. Take 45 seconds, talk to the person next to you. What do you think are possible problems that can arise from this system of government?
The revelation of the church.
What are possible problems? Enlightenment's actually okay, bring it back to me. Bring it back to me. So what are possible problems with this system, Haley?
So, what did I say? Oh, that it's like kind of like the luck of the draw of if you're gonna get a good or bad leader. Like you don't have the power to like choose who you want. So it's kind of like a guessing game. Is if you get a really good leader and then everything prospers, or if you get a really bad leader and it's just horrible.
Mm-hmm. And we see that happen, right? I showed you guys a picture of Louis XIV. Louis XIV takes the throne at the age of 4. Because his father died, he was in control, so therefore Louis then gets the crown. Does that seem like it makes a lot of sense to you? Probably not, right? You're kind of just at his will. Whatever Louis XIV decides, that's the law. Don't worry, Mark, we're gonna get to it. He doesn't actually make laws at 4. Don't
Well,
worry.
no. I was thinking, because, like, don't they do that now in, like, Europe? Or wherever they do that, like, London? Where, like, the queen, like, if she dies, like, is in the...
They have a prime minister.
Yes. How is the queen checked in London, though, you know, in England? How is the queen checked? What kind of government they have? Anybody know? They have a parliament. It's called a constitutional monarchy. So they have people who check the queen. She actually makes no real law. Yeah, they kind of phase that out. Yep, more of a figurehead. More of a figurehead. So these are some of the absolutist leaders. We're not going to talk about them all, but here are a few of them. We did talk about this man right up here, Henry VIII. What does he do? What does Henry VIII do?
He separates.
Creates a name.
He creates his own church. He separates from the Catholic Church, and he changes the official religion of the country to the Church of England or the Anglican Church, right? So you're at his whim. He is this absolutist leader. He decided he no longer wanted to be Catholic, so guess what? You're no longer Catholic. There's a few other ones up there. We got Louis, the man I've been talking about, Philip in Spain. Catherine the Great in Russia. I'm going to tell you right now, almost every leader in Russia, they just add the Great to the end of it. They're pretty famous for that. So here's a few. We're just going to talk about 2 today. And Louis XIV, I think, is one of the most interesting ones, and that's why I wanted to talk about him. He is something else. So like I told you, he takes the throne at the age of 4. He does have his mother and an advisor who rule in his name. So technically, he is the head of the state, but he's not making any laws at the age of 14. He's not making any decisions. His mother and this advisor are doing it for him. He believes it is his divine right to rule. Now, if you're given the throne at age of 4, feel like you might get a big head, and it seems like this guy did a little bit. He names himself the Sun God, or the Sun King, and here's why. Because like the sun, the world revolves around Louis. That's this man. That is him. He takes full and absolute power. Once his advisor passes, he crowns himself the leader. He is now in control of the government, when before he would have had an advisor working with him in the governmental system. And his Estates General does not meet once under his rule. Not once. He has nobody checking his powers. We're going to watch a really quick video. All I want you to do while you're watching this video on Louis is look at how his form of government is different from our form of government. What are some of the things that Louis does that would not happen in America today? How is his power unchecked where our power is checked?
From the age of 4, Louis XIV would become one of the most famous and longest reigning monarchs in French history.
Anne of Austria, whose Louis XIV's mother nominally ran the country while he was a small boy. But there was a man named Mazarin who really had the reins of government. He was kind of a despot and he was very manipulative.
When Louis was 9, an uprising called Le Fronde forced him to flee from Paris. Le Fronde ended in 1653, and Louis was crowned in 1654.
Louis never really forgave the nobility who rebelled against the crown. He chose to live outside of Paris most of his reign. He was determined to take traditional powers away from the nobility in France.
In 1660, Louis XIV married Marie Theresa of Spain.
Louis treated the Queen with politeness, even an exaggerated respect due to a daughter of the King of Spain. He also kept mistresses quite openly.
In 1661, Louis's longtime advisor Mazarin died, and rather than appoint a new first minister, Louis shocked France by taking personal control of the government, centralizing the legal system and military. Using French manufacturers and architects, Louis began to build the extravagant Palace of Versailles. But the greater drain on France's treasury was Louis's hunger for war.
On his deathbed, Louis XIV told his great-grandson and successor, the future Louis XV, that he had made war too lightly and too much for his own vanity.
In 1685, Catholic Louis revoked the Edict of Nantes, which had permitted Protestants to openly practice their faith.
Several 100,000 French Protestants, you know, left France, and this was both economically and culturally devastating for France in the long run.
In 1700, Louis XIV's grandson, Philip of Anjou, was named the heir to the Spanish throne. Philip was also second in line of succession for the French crown.
All of Europe was worried that Spain, with its huge global empire, was going to become united politically to France, the most powerful country militarily in Europe, creating a power that would be completely irresistible.
The War of the Spanish Succession threw the country deeply into debt. After 13 years of fighting, Philip renounced his claim to the French crown and ended the war. Louis had 4 more heirs for the throne, but only one would survive him.
He thought he was leaving this dynasty of boys that could take over from him, one by one. Smallpox, measles, or as I like to say, killed by doctors, which is the reality of the case.
Louis XIV died on September 1st, 1715, leaving the crown to his great-great-grandson.
I think Louis XIV should be remembered as a tragic figure. Somebody who, through his early love for war, left France broken, exhausted, and bankrupt.
Okay, talk to the people around you real quick, see what they found. How is his form of government different from our form of government? How is his form of government different as well? You did. Where did you guys see Okay, bring it up to me. Bring it up to me. So how is Louis XIV's form of government different from what we would consider from our government? No different? Mark?
He didn't have any advisors, like he was just passing these laws. But like right now, we pass laws through like Congress, and then they'll like decide. But like he was just like, this is the law, and then it would just happen.
Where did you see that in the video?
It said like after his like uncle died, he like took over, or no. But yeah,
Not his
you
uncle,
know when
his
advisor
advisor,
died,
yeah.
his advisor died, he like took over like in the entirety of France and just said he would rule everybody.
Yeah. After his advisor, Mazarin, dies, he makes himself the head of the government. What else? How else is his form of government different from our form of government? How else? How did, yeah.
So I noticed that like it's passed like the crown or the crown was passed down through the bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think it went to his great grandson or something.
It ends up going to his great-grandson.
Yeah,
Or his
great-grandson.
grandson.
Yeah, so it's like passed down through the bloodline.
Mm-hmm. It's passed down through the bloodline. That is one major way it's different. What else? There's one thing that they mentioned in the video that I had previously mentioned. The thing about war. Say it a little louder.
Like, he basically was going to war, like, whenever he felt like it in America, like, don't you guys need to, like, I feel like the Senate, like, that thing with the senators and all that?
Yeah, so Louis XIV, he could declare war whenever he wanted. He wasted a lot of France's money just declaring war. Now, obviously, we know today the president is not just allowed to declare war whenever he pleases. This, I don't need you guys to know. This is just something that I find very interesting. So, the word Versailles, you guys did see. Maybe the only thing I'll write down from this is that Versailles is Louis' palace. And the only reason you really need to know that is because Louis XIV spends an enormous amount of money creating this extraordinary palace. You can go to it today. This summer, I think I told you guys that I went to London and I went to Ireland. When I went to Ireland, my friends went to France, and they went, it's crazy. They give you a golf cart when you go because you can't walk the whole thing. It's so large, you can't walk the whole thing. They give you a golf cart at the front. So this palace, it had 700 rooms. It was his home. Part of Louis XIV's career as this absolute leader, he kind of started to belittle the people under him. Nobody was going to have as much power as him. So he did different things to show his source of power. One of the things he did was called the ritual rising. In the morning, he would have people watch him wake up. This was considered a privilege to watch Louis XIV wake up. And you might even get to give him his shoe. You might get to hand him his shoe. Or maybe even hand him his rinsing pot to clean himself in the morning. That is considered a pleasure. You are welcome. That's part of him trying to show his elite power, right? Here are a few images of Versailles. just so you guys can kind of get an idea of how much money Louis actually spent on this palace. This is the front of it. These are the golden gates that lead to his palace. This is just part of the back of it. There's a good amount of gardens. I don't remember how many, but there's a few different gardens. I think there's something like 45 fountains. He has an entire area just for his mistress. Anybody know what this is? Has anybody ever seen this before?
Seen it on SpongeBob.
You saw it on SpongeBob? So this is the Hall of Mirrors. This is where the Treaty of Versailles that you guys were all referring to, this is where it gets signed. In the Hall of Mirrors. That's the only reason you might have seen it. He decorates his entire home with these elaborate paintings. He spends an extraordinary amount of money. He oversees every detail of it. Every time they go to add something to his home, he's overseeing it. He lost an extraordinary amount of money for France because his power went unchecked. He waged war, like you guys saw in the video, at his own whim. He expelled the Huguenots. We know he built that treaty, he built Versailles. The Huguenots were also mentioned in the video. These were French Protestants. He expels them. They're no longer allowed to practice in France. You are Catholic or you are nothing. He saw them as a threat to his power, to his religious and his political power. But it really ends up hurting the community, hurting France, because they were a very productive part of the economy, right? You can't just expel an entire section of your citizens, right? That's not going to work for you. So all of that power going unchecked, he ends up losing a lot of money for France. What are possible problems with this? What's going to happen when someone has this much unchecked power? They're going to lose it? Yes, he abuses it. And how do you think the people are going to react to this? It's hard to get behind a leader, even if he's the chosen by God leader. It's hard to get behind him if he's doing these kind of things to your economy. You can stand behind a leader if he's making, it's a lot easier, even if you have a bad leader, to stand behind him if your economy is good, right? You have money, your family's healthy, you have food, you have a job, you're not as worried. When all of those things start to crumble, it's a lot harder to stand behind a leader. Here's another one that we're going to talk about real quick. This is Peter the Great, like I told you. Russian leaders love to add the great to the end of it. I tried really hard this weekend to start getting people to call me Morgan the Great. Didn't work. They didn't think it was funny, even though I'm a history major. They didn't care. So he took the throne at the age of 10. Again, extremely young, right? He created this policy of westernization. When he was young, he got educated in Western Europe. Russia was extremely behind in comparison to the rest of Europe. Yeah, you know that? Oh yes, so Russia's extremely behind compared to the rest of Europe. And Peter the Great starts this policy of westernizing. He's taking ideas, technology, culture. He does this thing where he starts taxing beards. Russia's a lot colder than Europe, a lot colder. So men tended to keep their beards. Peter didn't like that because it wasn't as gentlemanly as it is. He didn't think that they looked Western enough, so if you had a beard, you were taxed on it. He wanted you to shave your face, even though it's a little bit colder in Russia. He also took a lot of attire from the West, even though Russia's really cold. That like thin, tight type things, right, that the men used to wear in Western Europe. Did a lot of that. Even though it wasn't as practical for Russia, he really reinforced it. And he did have a lot of accomplishments. He is known as the one person who brought Russia into the modern world, essentially. He improved technology, he improved education, he created a lot of waterways and canals, mining and textiles. What are textiles? Anybody know what a textile is?
Do you have like clothing?
Clothing manufacturing, yeah. Anything that has to do with, cloth making. He backed a lot of trading companies, which all sound like really great things. But if you revolted against him, you were executed. I'm not going anywhere. That is crazy, isn't it, Bones? They had absolute power, though. You missed the beginning of it a little bit. But these leaders, they had absolute power. Their followers believed that they were given that power from God. And when you have that kind of power, it's a little hard to question him. And really, just like I just talked about with Louis XIV, right? He destroys the economy. It makes it a little bit harder to follow an absolute leader who does that. Whereas Peter, he was improving Russia. Okay, so as you guys finish writing down the slide, I'm handing you out a reading and a graphic organizer. The reading is the stages of revolutions. This is the fever model that you guys were looking at when you did that vocab matching activity. I'm handing you a graphic organizer to go with it. From the reading, you only have to do the first 2 rows. So it says draw the phase, try to do some type of visual depiction of what that phase of the revolution would look like, and then it says to describe the phase. So from the reading, what does that stage of revolution mean? What does that stage of the revolution mean? Are we good on this slide? So you're going to read the stages of the revolution. This is what essentially they believe is to be the pattern of revolutions. Most revolutions follow in these phases, whether they're successful or not. It usually goes in these 4 phases. And then you're going to complete the first 2 rows. So the first row says, like I said, to draw the phase, then it says to describe the phase. Try to do a visual depiction. I don't care how you decide to do that, just some sort of visual depiction, and then you're drawing, or you're describing it. After that, I'll give you the 2 bottom rows. Sound good?
So these two right here.
No. You're gonna do these 2 rows, but you have to do the whole reading.
Oh.
Got it? Trinity.
Are we done with
What was that?
the note-taking?
We are done with note taking, yes.